Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I know this is kind of a different format / style of video. I wanted to do something that I think is very important. Something that I've had my eye on doing for a while now, before even like the recent news. I did a video a couple of days ago, kind of reacting to the news about Destiny 2, you know, one of my favorite games of all time, if not my favorite game of all time. And today I wanted to really expand that idea by providing a solution instead of just complaining, you know, because I hate when people do that, okay? So in today's video, I'm doing it in a very Donkey style of video. He's a Destiny 2 creator who does like theories and lore videos and all that. He usually has a whiteboard behind him, but I thought, let's upgrade a little bit. And let's do it on an actual TV in the form of a slideshow, okay? So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is my pitch for a Destiny 3 story and how I need your help, okay? Very important. Stay till the end because that's when we're going to talk about that portion. So a little history of myself. I've been writing stories since I can remember. I remember being like 5 and writing like a Minecraft like story. It was weird, right? But it was fun. It was fun. I had fun doing it, and it was very cool. I have been playing Destiny since 6th grade. I did just graduate. I'm 18 now. I was like 12 then, maybe younger, when I started playing Destiny. And that was Destiny 2, right? During the Shadowkeep kind of expansion era of time. I've been a story and lore junkie for as long as I can remember. I've always liked the stories of games, books, movies, TV shows, all that kind of thing. And I think delving into that kind of history is really fun, right? It's cool to me. And also, whenever I make something that's like an adaptation or in a universe type of deal, I usually like to respect the source material. I'm very intent on respecting the source material, as it says on there. Now, I have written many original stories, adaptations, and projects over the course of my life. And down here, I just decided to include 3 lore books, Unveiling and Books of Sorrow and stuff like that, so there's that for you. Here's the problem, okay? The thing we all know at this point in time, okay? Destiny 2's live service is ending, okay? Which means no more story, no rewarding conclusions, many loose threads, and approximately 0, count them, 0 satisfaction, okay? So listed here, I have just a few examples of what I'm talking about. So you got Xivu Arath, right? Who we'll be talking about a lot today. Her story will never come to a conclusion. We'll never probably see her in-game either. Lodi, we're never going to see again. And with that comes Old Chicago. We're never going to visit Old Chicago, which is pretty sucky. Like, we were promised to visit Old Chicago, and now we're not. As well as Fundament. Now, Fundament was never like, oh, we're going to go visit Fundament as much as it was for Old Chicago. But Fundament is ultimately the homeworld of Xivu Arath, which I could see us going to at some point. More on that later. Here is my solution to this problem, okay? So, Destiny 3, right? It's what we all want at this point in time, okay? So, as far as we know, it is not currently in development or even greenlit, which is pretty bad, okay? We would want something like this with an announcement of the end of Destiny 2 to have hope for a Destiny 3, but as far as we know, according to insiders, there's nothing currently in development or greenlit. Like, nothing in this universe at all. And Destiny Rising also seems to be going downhill, and that's not even canon either. That's a mobile game. So, what this provides is actually a blank slate for a new story, Project Payback, as many have called it over the years. There was a Destiny game in development called Payback, but obviously that got shelved, or just scrapped entirely as well. Alright, let's talk about longevity as well. Another 6+ years of story and gameplay. We're going to go over 3 years today. We're not going to do the other 6 or 3+, but we are going to do 3 years. Focus on these 3 years and the development of these 3 years, okay? Which would be 3 expansions total. We're going to get into that more in a sec. New mechanics, so we got dogfights, SRL, which is actually an acronym for Skimmer Racing League. I have an interesting idea about that. And any of these topics that I'm going to go into, I can also delve more into as time goes on. Just let me know if you guys would be interested in that, okay? And new characters. That's very vague, and I kept it that way for a reason, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a minute, okay? Then we got the benefits and drawbacks, gap in time story, which leaves room for plot holes. Plot holes can also exist outside of the gaps in the story, which I do touch on a little bit later. But yeah, without further ado, talk about not currently in development or greenlit. So kind of delving into this a little bit more, right? We've got no hints towards story, gameplay, etc. when it comes to the development. Loose threads still need tied. Layoffs coming per insider info. I believe that came from Jeff Snyder, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe. It comes from a very reliable insider, okay? And then for the greenlit side of things, Sony has not given approval as far as we know. Came from the same report, I believe. Approval not likely according to insiders. Not shelved entirely. So they left the idea of further Destiny development very open, right? Not inside of Destiny 2. That's in a box, right? But otherwise, they have not really said anything about other Destiny games or media. So there's hope, right? Alright, now we get into the news story, the real nitty-gritty. Okay, this is where I'm very passionate about it. Right, I'm not a gameplay guy, or I am, but I'm not like a gameplay designer. That's not what I accredit myself as being. I accredit myself as being a story writer, okay? So this is where I think it really shines, and we get into like the nitty-gritty detail. So where we start our new ghost and the planets we will explore as part of the story. I think all of these things are very integral, right? These are core Destiny elements. The characters we meet along the way, the planets we go to that are new, the ghost, our ghost, which I don't know if I touch on this too much, but I think it would be wise to create an entirely new ghost, right? A new like voice actor for the ghost. Maybe he's got a little bit of a quirkier personality. Something along those lines. But let's get more into that here. So where we start, we're actually starting on Tora Bottle. Yes, I think this would be, and I actually got this idea from an Astacross video that he made recently about Destiny 3. I think this would be a perfect spot to start our new journey, right? So it would start in the middle of a war with Xivu Arath that shows no signs of ending. I think making her the big bad for the first 3 years is going to be an integral part of what we do. I think she deserves it. She's been having this build-up since before I can even remember, right? And I think it would be very important to put her as like the centerpiece villain of this saga, right? There's still Six and the Winnower, but for now we're going with Xivu Arath as this like, I don't even know if you can call her temporary, but as this character that needs her like loose end tied, right? So then our ghost finds us in the middle of a battlefield. Yes, this is a very war-torn planet, right? We've known that for a long time, but the Guardians would have personal stake in the war for a reason that I'm about to get into, okay? He explains throughout the opening mission that humanity left the solar system after we failed to bind the Nine, and Six took over as the Lord of Every Nothing, the new Taken King. We know that Six is the Alchemist and the Lord of Every Nothing. I think the latter one's actually more suspicion, but it's all but confirmed at this point. And I think it would be very cool to see a timeline in which we literally cannot like go back to the solar system in its current state. So now we've moved there to reclaim the Cabal homeworld with the help of Kaido and the Iron Lords, okay? I think this is something they've been hinting at for a long time, and I think would be just hitting the nail on the head to do it story-wise, to finally pull that trigger in the story, right? Now the cool part, okay, let's talk about gameplay and location. So revamped game modes from D1 and D2 now sit on Tora Bottle. We'll get into one of them that I had like a really good idea about here in a sec. But yeah, just imagine some game modes that already exist, like Onslaught, or games like that, or game modes like that, right? And they would obviously be getting a revamp to now be set on Tora Bottle, but also gameplay-wise and like what we're doing and all that. Campaign would also be non-linear, similar to Edge of Fate. That was like the one thing from Edge of Fate I actually liked. The fact that we could go on like these side quests, and it didn't really matter. But if you want to get the story done as soon as possible, you can also do that, and do all the side quests later. That was cool. And I think it was flawed, sure, but it can be improved, and I think they have the ability to improve it. I think they obviously showed that with Renegades as well. The Hive have been revamped and have new troops, Living Hive Tank, which shoots Cursed Thrall explosions. That's just one of the ideas I had. In the moment, that's the one I wrote down just because I think that sounds really cool. Imagine like a Drake, right? But with it's actually like a living creature from the hive that shoots Cursed Thrall explosions. That would be really cool in my opinion. Take Back. This is actually a game mode that I was thinking about earlier that I think would be really cool. Similar to the Wellspring, hear me out, but we're powering the Upended with the help of Savathun. I think that would bring in like a really cool like endgame mode where we're inside the pyramid ship. Maybe we start outside the pyramid ship, but Savathun has basically brought it onto Torabottle from her throne world, and now we're starting outside the pyramid ship, going into it, powering the Upended to basically kill Xivu Arath, or to attempt to, which I don't think I had it written down here, but ultimately we're successful in that, right? That happens in the raid, and the raid takes place against Premier Loom. I think giving him like a final send-off, not off-screen, is actually really cool. I think it's going to benefit the story a lot, okay? And ultimately that raid would probably take place, I don't want to say it would take place in the Upended, but we could probably take the Upended and, as Patrick would say, move it somewhere else. I think that would be really cool. And obviously we don't have the power of Zeta, but the Upended is still there. So we could essentially take the Upended and power it another way through the help of Savathun and Hive magic. Eris could probably be involved too. These are things we think about, or we gotta think about, right? So now for the campaign. The theme for the first 3 years is payback against the remaining forces of the Witness who have turned to the side of Six, who is the second knife of the Winnower. I don't know if he would ever adopt the official title of second knife, but it would be there, right? It would be implied like, oh, he's the second knife of the Winnower, just like how the Witness was the first knife. Here's the problem with them though. While Six and the Winnower both know that they could easily get inside the Traveler now, they instead choose to wipe out every Guardian, Ghost, and living being in the universe to ensure nobody can stop them. I think this would ensure a very interesting plot where we travel outside the universe, like we're escaping, right? Instead of trying to stay tucked in and defend our home, which I didn't write it down on here, but some people would stay back to do that, such as Crow. I think that would create a very interesting plot point and like roadblock for the villains specifically, okay? And then we figure all this out through dialogue with different characters who all survive what they call the second collapse. I think bringing in the idea of the second collapse is interesting because it'd be like a second collapse. I put it in quotes for a reason, right? It's not exactly like the collapse. Not like, there's different aspects to it, right? But it's ultimately, like, just put it under that branding to sound cool, right? Like, for them specifically, like, in-universe, right? Alright, now we have the characters for year 1. I didn't delve into characters for years 2 and 3, just because that's a little too specific for what we're going to cover today. But for the main characters, we've got Ikora, who's a lot more battle-hardened and, like, more serious somehow. And also, she's missing an arm but can still cast Nova Bomb through, like, the piece of arm that she has, like the shoulder, right? This is inspiration actually from Jedi Survivor, who there's a character in there, I don't remember his name, but he's the main villain. He's a Jedi from the High Republic, okay? And he is missing an arm, but he can still like use the Force through it, like a Force push or something like that. He can still do that. So that's kind of inspired by that. And then we've got Eris, who fully embraced her Hive God status and has made it a permanent condition. Think about how she looked during Season of the Witch. That would be how she is now, essentially. And just as cool, right? Or even more cooler, actually. You got Drifter. Drifter's kind of like a centerpiece of, like, we have to get him back, kind of. But it's more of like a side plot. It's not the main plot of what we're trying to convey. But Eris constantly mentions, like, oh, we need to get Drifter back. We need to, you know, find this, find that. He's my love interest, right? She's actually, like, got reason to want him back. So Drifter was captured by Loom, being held prisoner as an oracle for Six after Drifter killed Dredge and Bale. So this is interesting because I think killing Dredge and Bale, like, in the time in between this, like, gap that takes place, right? Because there's an obvious gap of, like, things that happen. And I think killing Dredge and Bale in between now and then would actually be really cool. I don't think he's a character that deserves, like, a crazy death or anything like that. Because he's not the most compelling. He's not this, like, super cool. All he is a catalyst for Six. And that's what makes him cool to me, specifically. So he would be killed off screen. Loom would capture Drifter, and Drifter would be the new Oracle for 6. I don't remember the actual word they use when it comes to the 9. Yeah, I don't remember what exactly they call them, but I'm just calling them an Oracle. You guys will know what I mean. So Saint 14, here's where things get really interesting, actually. He has embraced his power after the death of Osiris. I think this would be a really cool plot point that would drive home the character of Saint 14. Imagine him going back to how he was during the Dark Age, but it's because of the death of Osiris, to which he was buried on Neomuna. That's just kind of like thrown in there. It's never like shown, and we don't know much about it. He had a tomb, he had a funeral on Neomuna. Side characters, we've got Savathun. We don't see her a lot until the raid, because she kind of likes to hide in the shadows. We know this about Savathun. So we don't see her a lot until the raid, where we fail to defeat Loom, and she sacrifices herself as one final trick. I don't know how the one final trick would work, but it could very easily be integrated into the story. You wouldn't really have to force anything to do that, because that's the character of Savathun, right? Then we've got Kaido, held on life support, comes back halfway through the expansion. I think that would be cool, is like, if maybe for the first half we're kind of working to like bring Kaido back. That gives us a goal. It gives us a short-term goal that can be easily accomplished, right? And then Saladin on the front lines most of the time. This is why I've listed as side characters, because he would be on the front lines most of the time. He'd be very, like, we'd talk to him for dialogue and maybe fight alongside him in like a mission or two. But ultimately, he would be on the front lines most of the time. And I think that makes perfect sense for him. You know, he's got Wolfsbane, he's got all these things, and that would just work for him. Let's get into longevity. So how would this last, right? This will outline also some key elements of years 2 and 3 as well. But ultimately, how the game would last. How whichever studio is going to make it would ultimately be able to keep the game alive. Or keep the game alive for a number of years, right? So how this would work throughout the years, much as we all hate time gates, stay with me now, I feel as though it is important to make certain features tied to expansion launches in order to make things feel not too bloated and to give the team more time to come up with different ideas. These are just some basic like key header things, but there could also be like a bunch of stuff packed in between, right? The key features are as follows. Different races for Guardian customization. These would include our enemy, now allied factions such as the Cabal, Fallen, and Hive as well, which would come out in year 1 alongside Skimmer Racing League. Skimmer Racing League would actually be a lot different than Sparrow Racing League. It wouldn't be like a track. It'd be like, maybe you have goals in between and you gotta complete those goals, but it's still like racing, and it's still a league, and there's still skimmers, right? Dogfights in space and above the ground. This is key right here. I think this would be so cool. And I think it would be awesome, honestly. I think it would, it's something the players have been asking for a long time. We know this. And I think it would be great. The ships would have different features, such as a catch, allowing more players to pilot guns. This would come out in year 2. I think having a catch as part of year 2 would also be very integral. There's a good reason for this, which we'll get to in. And then Worm Hunt. Imagine the Great Hunt, but it's for worm gods. This would come out in year 3. Another reason we're putting this in year 3 is because the worm gods are going to be integral to the story of year 3. More on that in a minute. Outline for years 2 and 3. Year 2 takes place on Reese. Everybody wants that. Goal is to reclaim Elixni homeworld alongside Mizrax, Ido, and Aramis using the Echo of Reese. This is something that was hinted at way back in Revenant, if you guys remember that. Really bad act, but it told a fairly compelling story and gave us hope for the future, right? All 3 of those acts did. Or all 3 of those episodes did, not acts. Guardian factions are created, which introduces a supremacy style of game mode. This would be like a Crucible kind of game mode, and I think Shaxx would really find his groove in Reese, doing a Crucible game mode in Reese. And it would introduce a supremacy style of game mode. Think Battlefront 2 Supremacy. Now, there's a good reason I listed Battlefront 2 specifically. It's because for a lot of it, you're on ships. Like, you get on these ships, and you fly up into a bigger ship, and then you gotta blow that ship up, right? It's something that happens in every game in Battlefront 2 Supremacy, and I think that would be really cool to integrate here. Who cares if it's stealing an idea, right? It's awesome, okay? The raid for this expansion, which I didn't list one for Tora Bottle. I listed like the details of the story of the raid, but I didn't list like the actual raid itself, like the name. But the raid for this one would be called the Forgotten World. Obviously a reference to Reese, but also slay a worm god at the center of Reese. The center of Reese would be like this interesting place that the worm is carved out, and you can kind of see the worm like moving between encounters. Think about how you can see the Root of Nightmares tree like fully blooming, right? It'd be something similar to that, okay? And you'd be slaying a worm god at the center of it, at the center of Reese. The worm tells us the location of Xivu, which is Fundament. Okay, that is going to be year 3. So let's overview year 2 real quick. Takes place on Reese, reclaiming Elixni homeworld of Reese. Guardian factions are created. So this would kind of be like, you'd like join a faction, right? And this would be like the faction that you're set in. Kind of similar to how we had that in the Lawless Frontier. Okay, think something like that, but more Guardian-centric. The reason I decided to bring up Fundament as a key point of this is that it would not only lead us into the next expansion, but I think us damaging Xivu in some way during the events of year 1 would ultimately lead her to go into hiding on Fundament, and while she's in hiding and we don't have her location, it's like, okay, let's take back Reese in the meantime. I think that would be cool. So the worm tells us the location of Xivu, which is Fundament, okay? And then for year 3, all factions, Vanguard, Iron Lords, the Elixni, Cabal, and the Praxix launch an all-out attack on Fundament. This would be a really nice culmination of some story beats that were brought up in Renegades and Edge of Fate. The Dread are sent as agents of the Winnower to fight and protect a wounded Xivu. I think this would be cool to integrate the Dread somehow, and I think this is the perfect way to do it. Just make them agents of the Winnower, which they pretty much already are, and then have them fight and protect Xivu, who's now wounded from the Upended, right? The Worm Gods, under the Order of 6, destroy themselves and leave Xivu to die. That would be like later in the expansion, probably the 3rd to 2nd to last mission. Xivu questions her purpose after being abandoned and dies to the hand of the Guardians in a raid titled War of Extinction. I think that's a really cool name. It was originally called Brink of Extinction, but I think War of Extinction, integrating, the Hive God of War, would actually be really cool, okay? In her final moments, Xivu commands vengeance on the Lord of Every Nothing and tells our Guardian how to bind the 9. Because if we failed before, because we didn't really know what we were doing, we were just going off a hope and a prayer, basically, it'd be really cool if this is how we figure out how to bind the 9, is through Xivu's death, okay? It's almost like what happens in Season of the Witch, right? Where we kill Savathun, and then we learn the secrets of the 15th Wish. I think that's cool, and I think that would be very integral to the story, okay? Move on. Benefits/drawbacks of this story. There's a lot of benefits and a few drawbacks, but I think let's just get into that. So the situation benefits more Destiny, obviously, encapsulates what the community wants, and brings us to the story Bungie is trying to tell through Edge of Fate and Renegades. Kind of a win-win situation is what I was trying to get at here, basically. Then more features the community has been asking for. Think dogfights, think like big, large-scale battles. I think stuff like that. Little to no room for error. I don't see, if they follow near this outline, at least, how this could fail, It doesn't make any sense to me. This feels almost foolproof. Would love to know down in the comments what you guys think of this outline, though. Very expensive, would need a pre-Lightfall level of studio to work. That's a good measurement, like pre-Lightfall level of studio. They don't have that kind of studio anymore. They've laid off hundreds of employees since then. Wouldn't be able to be made by only Bungie. The studio is too small and people who left aren't going to come back. That's a point that Aztecross made as well. They're like, people who left, they're not going to come back. Like, we would need an entirely new team, and I would say even studio, to be able to make this work, okay? Plot holes. Why was there a worm on Reese? How did Osiris die? Where is Nimbus? Probably the most pressing question on everyone's minds. I'm kidding. Nothing can be set in stone. This is the gaming industry after all, and more so, this is the live service gaming industry, so it's even less set in stone. So the conclusion, I feel as though this needs to happen because the community is outcrying for more Destiny, okay? We as players and guardians make our own fate, and I feel deep down in my heart that this is the fate that needs to be made, okay? I think it just makes sense. It makes sense to go in this direction, to have this time jump where maybe our guardian dies, and they're telling the story for the new guardian of the old guardian. And maybe they even show in like a cutscene, like a flashback of like the funeral that was held in the corridors of time. Just like they show that with like them burying him with Ergo Sum. That would be cool, okay? How you can help. Share this video and the reasoning behind it. Reach out and petition for this Destiny 3 at least to happen. I'll link down below a petition that like probably close to 200,000 people have signed now to ultimately bring Destiny 3 to life. Leave critiques and ideas down in the comments. I kind of already brought that up, but that's what I want. That's the main call to action, okay? Blow this video and others like it up. Let them know you want it. That's how things happen. That's how things are made, okay? And thank you. So, to kind of bring this to a very decent ending, I think this is genuinely like a very big project that ultimately needs to happen. Dude, if it's 5 years down the line, I don't care. Set it in motion now, though. That's how we get stuff made, okay? So, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching this video. My name is Brevin Morrison, otherwise known as The Bee, and I hope you all have a great day. Stay safe out there. It's a crazy world.